Welcome to the Dr. Stacy Show, where we talk all things faith, love, and wellness. I am your host, Dr. Stacy, and I am so excited to be kicking off this season. Each season, we like to tackle a theme, and this season, we're going to be talking about being made well. And what does that look like in different spaces and just celebrating our uniqueness? Today, we're going to be talking about the idea of blended families, not broken families, but blended families and the beauty behind that. My special guest today is Dr. Naomi Hugh. I am so honored to have her with us. Her bio is amazing. So, Dr. Naomi, she graduated with her medical degree from Howard University. She did her pediatric residency at Cooper University Hospital. I personally have known her in her private practice work at Creswell Pediatrics. She's been a pediatrician there 26 years, has seen this practice grow to 10 pediatricians, over 10,000 patients in their patient base. Dr. Naomi has also been named a New Jersey Top Doc 2016 and 2017, as well as a New Jersey Favorite Kids Doc in 2024. Dr. Naomi has also added to her credentials, not just being an amazing pediatrician, but she also decided to go into the space of life coaching. And so she is a certified life coach. And she established herself under Dr. Naomi Hugh LLC as a family empowerment coach and is lovingly known by her families as Dr. Naomi. She is also a contributing author to Wives on Fire and has solo authored books, including Blended Beyond Expectations and also Joshua Chronicles. I know personally Dr. Naomi because we have worked together in our space, me as a therapist, you as a pediatrician, collaborating together. Thank you, Dr. Naomi, so much for being here today with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I am pleased to be here.
Well, folks, we're going to jump right on into blended families because one of the things, and Dr. Naomi, I'm sure you're seeing this in both as a life coach as well as a pediatrician, we are seeing blended families. And as I talk about statistics, for example, I read something where every day 1,300 new blended families are being established every single day through marriages. And 1/3 of weddings right now actually create step families and blended families. Dr. Naomi, you are no stranger to blended families, even in your personal story. Tell us a little bit about your blended family.
So my blended family began, I was a single mother of a son. I married a single Christian mother of a son who married and met a single Christian male of a son, a single Christian man with a son. And I always thought that, I'm a single Christian woman. I married this single Christian man. Our marriage was going to come together. We were going to be blended and we were going to be this wonderful example, not a perfect example, but a wonderful example of what a blended Christian family looks like.
And okay. So you set up the plot. Yeah, no, you set up the plot twist, and then what happened?
Yes, and then that is not what happened. I remember when I was dating my husband, a single woman, never married at age 39, I said that if I'm not married by the time I'm 40, I'm throwing myself this huge 40th birthday party. And then I met my husband when I was 36. We dated for 3 years, and I married at 39. And one of the things that I said to myself was, I'm an older woman. I am not looking for a knight in shining armor. There are no perfect marriages. There are no fairy tales. So that is not what I'm looking for. So even in the blending of my family, I did not expect a fairy tale family. However, I did expect a wonderful example of a Christian family, a blended Christian family, and that is not what happened.
And so, and I love that you are really highlighting that, right? Because I think we have the fairy tale. And for those of you who have seen the movie Blended, for example, it's an older film, but Drew Barrymore, Adam Sandler, long story short, they're on a blended family vacation. They're not together and then they end up together. Sorry, I spoiled it for folks. But the idea that we're going to come together and it's all going to work out and it's going to be great, even though we're in that Christian space, even though, again, you're good people, you're good to each other. Talk to us a little bit about maybe some of the things that you experienced in blending your family once you were blended.
Okay, so one of the things that I do write about in the book is about, children. So I had a son, my husband had a son, and one of the things I told him when I was dating was, I want to have more children. And he wanted to have more children. And, so I told him, so, you can't marry me and then decide at your later age because my husband is 11 years older than me. You can't marry me and then say, I don't want to have any more children. I want you to know that this is something that I want. And if you're not, first of all, if you're not interested in marriage, we don't need to date because I don't just date to date. And if you don't want to have any more children, I'm not your girl. And so it was fine. We decided we would have more children. So one of the things that I struggled with after we got married, we did have one son, our son, Joshua. He was conceived 6 months into our marriage. And so at the ripe old age of 40, I pushed to deliver this 8-pound, 2-ounce bouncing baby boy. It was lovely, but my son was now 13 and my husband's son was now 14. And so there were a lot of years between our children. So in planning to have more children, I actually experienced a season of infertility and having to go through that. That is definitely something that I did not expect to experience in my blended family. Beyond dealing with the infertility, the main struggle was my son Justin, having a bonus father in the home, and the rebellion that followed with that was a main heart of my book.
Mhm. I really want to even come to that because I know some people, they struggle with introducing like their children to people that they're dating. And I love that you said I didn't just date to date, right? Because that's going to be key too. What was that like, your son getting to know who would then be your husband? But when did you introduce them? How did you do that process of even getting the kids together? Share a little bit about that.
Okay, so we met at church. My son and I used to attend a family church, but they didn't have a children's ministry. And as my son was getting older, I said that he needed to have a stronger foundation. He needed to have activities that he could do with in ministry at church. So we started going to a new church. Absolutely loved it from the time we set foot in the door. And then they had a children's church that went on during the same time as the adult church. So I would take my son upstairs to the children's wing and sign him in. My husband was working in the children's ministry as an overseer of the children's church. And so I got to know my husband. Hi, every Sunday, glad to see you. My son was up there with him. So my son actually knew him before he knew that we started dating. And our first date was actually, we live in New Jersey. So Six Flags Great Adventure had a Christmas light show. So my husband and I started dating in the month of August, the year that we started dating. And in December is when we actually went on our first date, and it was a family date. We got in a car, and it was Kelvin and I. My husband's name is Kelvin. It was the two of us and then our sons, Justin and Stefan. And we got in a car and we drove to Great Adventure, stayed in a car, did the light show, and that was our first date. But we met in church, and that was a wonderful foundation.
All right, so y'all listening up. Church is still a place where we can meet good men, right? But
Yes,
that's
it
another
is.
episode. I talk about men leaving the church and we're all the men in church. But
Mhm.
Dr. Naomi, I love that piece of even the family date, right? To have something fun, something engaging. And I heard you say you all dated for 3 years and then
Yes.
just get married. You also said that there were some struggles with your son. I know you and I had talked a little bit about that. Share a little bit about how that, again, because it was just the two of you for 11 years before this marriage. Talk to us a little bit about that and how that impacted the two of you.
Well, the first chapter of my book is called Who's Running This House? Okay.
Oh,
Yes. So this is my husband became a deacon while we were dating. I am currently a deaconess in a church, but my walk as a deaconess happened in the midst of our marriage. So my husband became a deacon. He had his home that was 40 minutes from mine. So single man. And my husband's son, Stefan, lived with his mother, did not live in the same house with my husband. But my husband had a house that he had purchased with the thought of one day, having a family there. It was 40 minutes from where I live, 40 minutes from our church, 40 minutes from my job.
Mm.
I had my own home that I had purchased. It was built. I picked everything that was inside of it, the finishings that were inside of it. Very proud of that. Had this home. And when it was time for us to get married, I could not move into my husband's home because it was too far from my job. So he had his home. My home was newer. My home was bigger. And here we are, Christian family. The man is supposed to be the provider. My husband moved into my home.
Yes.
So that was one struggle right there in terms of how, we were viewed as my husband being a strong Christian male in the house, and yet he's moving into my home where my son at 11 years old was the alpha male. So alpha male, his territory is marked,
Mm.
males mark their territory. So my 11-year-old son had this home marked. This was his territory. My husband moved into our space. And what I did in the beginning, which I learned later I should not have done, is gave my husband free reign. You're my husband. You are Joshua's bonus father. You have free reign to rule our house, and it was a disaster. And my son, I'm going to date myself, Raggedy Ann and Andy. I told them, I feel like a Raggedy Ann doll where my husband was pulling on one arm and my son was pulling on the other arm, both pulling for my affection, my attention, my love. And I felt like my arms were going to be ripped out of the socket. My son was so bad that later he told me he was trying to be so bad that I would get a divorce because he didn't want to share me.
Wow.
And so my son became a prodigal. Thank God he came back, but he became a prodigal and I had to parent him from that state because I felt like I was losing him, literally.
Mhm. Yeah. And I appreciate your transparency. I know that helps somebody because even the idea, like you said, when we're at the point where we're professional, we have our own, right? Always we already have our own. And the things that we need to talk about, even as we blend our families, we talk about, right, raising the kids or finances, but where we live, but then to actually live that out
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, how do we, even with your son to say he marked his territory. And I love that you said he came back. But that, when you think about, again, we always say hindsight, but when you think about what do you wish people, or what do you think people should talk about being blended that maybe they don't even know to talk about?
Okay, so some of the things for sure in a blended family are, and I'll just say that the goal, we got married in 2000 and oh 6306. We got married in in 2006. And the goal was for my husband to move into my house. We would sell his house, then sell my house, and then purchase a home together. So that was the plan. And if it had worked out that way, it would have been beautiful. But the housing market crashed in
Mhm.
07, 08.
Yes.
And my husband could not sell his house. So we became landlords for 10 years.
Wow.
And so that was not what we expected to do. We expected to get rid of his, get rid of mine, and have ours together. And that was a great intention. And it was something that we talked about and something that was very important that I think would have added to the success of our blended family and less struggle of our blended family. But now when you have that struggle of, well, he's in my house, and I tried not to say, this is my house.
Mm.
My son was 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. He didn't care to not say, this is not my house. Oh, you're in my house. You don't have to ask me how my day was in school. My mom can ask me that. You
Wow.
don't have to tell me how did I have to do my chores. My mom can tell me that. So because we were still in my house and not our blended family home, that was a difficult thing. And for me as a Christian woman, I thought the best thing for me to do was to turn my son over to my husband, but without a relationship, you can't rule somebody without a relationship. And so it was a struggle, and it was a struggle for me because as my son became more and more rebellious, I put on my, superwoman cape, my Amazon woman cape, and said, I have to save my son. God entrusted this child to my care, not my husband's care, to my care. And so I have to do what I have to do to save my son as he's spiraling downward.
And what did that look like when we think about restoration? Because you said he was the prodigal son, but he came home. What
Mhm.
did that look like, and what process did you have to go through with your son to restore it?
Oh, it was extremely difficult, extremely difficult. There came a time when my son was out of the house at like 2 o'clock in the morning. I have a chapter in my book that's called Stop Running Through the Woods. And it's
Mm.
actually the dead center chapter of my book. I believe my book is 8 chapters, and I believe that book is chapter 4. Dead center in the book, it is the very first chapter that I wrote because it was the most difficult chapter for me to write because it was the point where my son's rebellion caused him to live outside of our home for a time. And when I got a phone call at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm struggling listening to the conversation and recording this conversation, even in my book, and my husband is telling me, he keeps hanging up. Why are you answering the phone? Just go to sleep. Just let him be out there. You know, the whole thing. I literally said in that moment, Lord, help me with my disobedience because I cannot turn my son over to this man. With your help, I have to struggle to save my son. And that was really, really difficult because I thought that I was being a disobedient wife, a disobedient Christian wife. But I also felt like I had to be the mother that God entrusted me to be to save my son. And our book is extremely transparent. And I told my son when I was writing it, you have to give me permission to write this and you have to help me write it. So there's a chapter in the book called Letters from the Heart. And I published letters that my son and I wrote to each other the 6 months that he was outside of our home and how I parented him even through those letters. And it was difficult, but it's a good chapter in a book for a parent to read, especially a mother, when you have a child who is a prodigal and you still trust God and believe God that he's going to bring your child home and you still have to parent him through those painful moments. So it's an extremely transparent book.
I love that. And folks, we're talking about the Blended Beyond Expectations book that Dr. Naomi has authored and written. And you can definitely get that on Amazon and all places where books are. And I love that because a lot of people would not share, even in Christian circles, right? Because we're judgy. I always tease people, churchy people are judgy, right? That, oh,
Mhm,
what do you
mhm,
mean you can keep them in your home? What do you mean he had to leave? There are periods and times, I mean, in the mental health space, and I know in the medical space, you see this all the time, where we do have to make those really hard decisions to help the welfare of children, right? To say,
mhm,
hey, there is a time and space where everybody needs a moment, right?
mhm,
And that six
mhm,
months was that opportunity. And like you said, we didn't stop parenting just because they were not at home. We still
mhm,
continue to do our role and show up. But
mhm.
even being able to provide that support to then say, okay, now we can transition back. And Dr. Naomi, I'm listening to the timeline and the story, right? And even the idea of you moving into life coaching
Mhm.
and family empowerment, because you even said family empowerment coaching, which I love that too, right? The idea of helping families. Talk to us a little bit about that transition into coaching and how do you use your book, your experiences? Tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing with families.
Okay. I wrote my book and released it in 2020. So in the middle of the pandemic, that happened. And I released the book in September of 2020. And then unfortunately, in February of 2021, my bonus son, my husband's son, passed away. He was 28 years old. And I had just released the book, had just started talking about our blended family and was ready to start marketing and doing talks and all of that. And then my bonus son dies. And it took us 6 months. So from February until August. And I didn't talk. I didn't talk about my book. I didn't talk about my blended family because I used to say, my 3 sons.
Yeah.
And now we have 2 sons. And that was a very difficult season for my husband. It was a difficult season for me. And this is not in my book, but there are transitional seasons that come when you are not the biological mother or father of a child who passes away. And so then you get put on the outside because now my husband and my bonus son's mother seem to mourn that differently than I. And even though I had been in my bonus son's life since he was 12 years old and he passes away at 28, I was still treated as an outsider, as well, you are Kelvin's wife and your job is to support him, but you're not really hurting. You're not really mourning. Your son Justin isn't really mourning because they were bonus siblings, but your son Joshua, well, that was his he shared a father with him, so he's mourning differently. So there's a whole lot that even comes into that space with a blended family. But I had been helping families through my job as a pediatrician, and then talking about my work, talking about my space as a blended family, that so many people would say, you have a lot to say. You need to help families in a different way outside of just being a pediatrician. And so in 2021, in the middle of the pandemic, that's when I started taking classes and decided that I was going to be a life coach. And what kind of life coach do I want to empower women only? And I said, no, I empower families. And so I was certified as a individual life coach and then a group coach. And so I call myself a family empowerment coach because that's what I do. That is how I empower families through my blended family experience and through my experience as a pediatrician. That's how Dr. Naomi was birthed. Dr. Hill is the physician pediatrician. Dr. Naomi is the life coach.
I love it. You're the second person I've done 2 recordings today, and they did the same thing, right? They're like, "Yes, this is who I am in this space, and this is who I am in this space." But I love that you have the experience in both spaces, right? That come together, that they create these really wonderful opportunities. And just to hear even the idea of grief and loss, right? And how that
Mhm,
feels different. I love that you say bonus son and not stepson, right? Like again, even our language, our strength-based language around
mhm,
how we describe our families being blended, because there when I think about where we are, in society today and the statistics around blended families and getting people to say, the traditional family is a blended family now.
mhm,
We
mhm,
look at 50% being blended or commingled. Hey, listen, this is what it's the traditional now feel for families. And I love that even in the midst, right, of COVID, in the midst of your own pain, in the midst of that, you said there's something that I can give back because of my
mhm.
experiences. And that's what I do love, the authenticity and the transparency that you're sharing with people around that. So, Dr. Naomi, as we kind of wrap up, what would be kind of like your main parenting tip, your advice, something that you would say to people that are blending in that process of blending? What would be your Dr. Naomi advice to them?
Okay, so my Dr. Naomi advice actually comes from the last chapter of my book that's called Just Breathe. The first chapter, Who's Running This House, was chaos. The final chapter, Just Breathe. And one of the things that I had come to learn in reading books on blended families, reading books on prodigal children, is that we will always be parents to our children, but there are seasons to parenting. There are different ways that you should parent your toddler. That's different than parenting your middle schooler versus your young adult. And even when your children become parents themselves and you're now grandparents, there's even different ways that you still parent. I always say that we parent lifelong. Some people may believe that, adult children aren't parented. I believe that they are. I think that even at the age of 56, my parents still parent me in different ways and I need them and I appreciate them being there. And so the final chapter of my book, when I talk about Just Breathe, is the different stages of parenting that as an adult, if you recognize those and what your role is at the different stages of parenting, it will make life so much easier. It will make your job as a parent so much easier, and it will make your child's role in those stages so much easier for you to accept and to understand, because our brains go through different developmental cycles, and that frontal lobe, is not fully developed until you are 25 years old. So when you start parenting from the womb, I don't say you finish that first that stage. You can't say that you're a good parent until your kid is 25 years old. That's how I see it. Until that frontal lobe is fully developed, you still have a significant role in the development of your child's life. And, yeah, just breathe. Just
Just
breathe.
breathe. I love that. And Dr. Naomi, that is going to all of my parents that think even with college kids, you can let them go. No, no, you're still parenting. You're still
Mhm,
parenting. 25.
mhm,
I love it. All right. So,
mhm.
Dr. Naomi, before you go, we have a segment of our show, which is our Laffy Taffy joke of the day. And I always tease folks because laughter is good medicine. And so we're going to see if you can get the Laffy Taffy joke of the day. Okay, ready?
I'm
All
ready.
right. So it says, what button can't unbutton? What button can't unbutton?
What button can't unbutton?
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. What? Your belly button.
Yes, you got it.
Is that right?
I love it. And I try, it's so funny. I try to get it related to my guests without them knowing, and you perfectly nailed it. Wonderful. All
That's
right.
the
Dr.
pediatrician in me.
Now that you got your Laffy Taffy joke, you're like two of like 13 guests that got it. So this is awesome. Tell folks, how can they reach out to you for life coaching, for all the things that you do? How can they get your book? Go ahead and share how folks can connect with you.
Okay. So I actually have a copy of my book here. Let me just show you so you see what the cover looks like.
Mhm.
So it is available on I always say do Amazon, Blended Beyond Expectation, one expectation, no S at the end. That's available on Amazon. And I am on Facebook. I am on Instagram as Dr. Naomi L. Hugh, and my email address is that's Dr., not the word spelled out, but DrNaomi Hugh at gmail.com. Dr. Naomi L. Hugh at gmail.com. You can find me there. You can find me on Facebook. I'm under Naomi Hugh. DM message me there, like, follow, subscribe, all of that sort of kinds of stuff. And, you can connect me and then I can get connected with you in whatever way you feel necessary, needed, and liked.
I love that. Thank you, Dr. Naomi. All right, folks. So as we close out our Love the Babies Well segment today, I just want to share from 1 Corinthians 1:10 that reminds us to agree with one another in what we say and what we do, and that there shouldn't be division among us. And we think about this in blended families. Blended is not broken. And as we see families uniting and coming together, we really do need to say and stop saying things like, well, they're not traditional or there's something wrong with them because they're blended. No, they're perfect. And creating this unity and working together, we're seeing children thrive. And there's a harmony that comes when we learn to support each other. And I love how Dr. Naomi just said, let's just breathe, take a moment of understanding, look at this as a beautiful opportunity for our children, but also for us, and understand that there's definitely purpose in being blended together. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to the Dr. Stacy Show. Until next time, keep the faith, love the babies, and pursue wellness.